Welcome back to the Authenticity Calling podcast. I'm your host, Ralitza Spassova, and today I'm being joined by a very special guest, a dear friend of mine and fellow coach, Dr. Judith Borger. Nice to see you again. Welcome back to the podcast. A welcome for the first time, actually, to the podcast. We've had so many conversations that I feel like we've done this before.
Yes, it is so great to be here. Yes, it's my first time on the podcast, and I am so excited.
So excited to have you here. And you have your own podcast as well. Do you mind telling our audience about that? That way, if anyone wants to hear more from you, they can hear on your podcast as well.
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. My podcast is called the Aesthetic Doctor Podcast, and it really is aimed at allowing our listeners to live their most beautiful life in all the ways. I do talk a lot about aesthetic medicine, but then I talk about coaching as well. So it's the most expansive, the most beautiful life from the inside out and the outside in. I do own a med spa, I do coach, I'm a physician, so it kind of blends all of my things. And, you and I have had a great conversation about the divine feminine, the divine masculine. And so there's conversations like that. And then there's mixed in with conversations about, Botox, laser hair removal, all of the procedures that especially a lot of women are quite curious about.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I love that you bring it all together. I think a lot of times when people think about aesthetics, right, it's all, oh, it's so superficial. It's just about like fixing yourself on the outside, but then there's no talk about what's going on internally. So I just love that you marry the two and that the people that you work with end up totally transformed, like from the inside out. And they look good, they feel good. It's like everything is just combined in this beautiful package. And it's just such a beautiful space to be connected with you because of the way that you see the human being and the way that we can actually express ourselves in the world. So thank you for doing that work and for having the podcast for those conversations and sharing your wisdom and knowledge and teaching and just all of the things that you do in the way that you show up in the world.
Well, thank you. And it is so funny that you say that because I find my work in aesthetics is really so deep because, people come to me and they really share their most vulnerable kind of insecurities.
Wow.
I think if you go to somebody and it's really just let me inject the Botox 2 centimeters from your brow line, that is very different than the relationship I have with my patients. And it's funny because my OBM always says like they come for the Botox, but they stay for like the coaching.
Yes.
And it is really funny because I don't see my work as superficial at all. And, we're on a podcast, but it's so funny because, if you do see the video, I hope you don't. I'm like literally out of the shower with no makeup on, no concealer, no nothing.
And you
So
look so
I think some of
gorgeous.
that is also sort of that idea that you can be okay with yourself as you are.
Yeah.
And, if it happens to be that a podcast gets rescheduled and you just jumped out of the shower, you're like, okay, coming on. And, I think that is really the work from the inside out that does that. And then, of course, a little work from the outside in. So you do have less imperfections and all of that stuff. But, most of us are our most critical critic of ourselves, right? It's very easy for us a lot of times to see the beauty and the radiance and all of the things in other people. And
Mhm.
then, we have these generations of wounds and self-talk where we're not seeing that same beauty and radiance and enoughness and worth in ourselves. So a lot of, my coaching really is around worthiness and is around, some of uncovering and healing some of these deep wounds that are really holding us back.
Yeah, and that's such powerful and important work. And it's actually 11:11 here. So perfect timing as always. The magic
Yes,
is
yes,
always
yes.
there. So yeah, I love to hear more about sort of if there's someone listening right now and if they're at this sort of crossroads, because I really do see it as a crossroads when we're looking at ourselves externally and we're judging ourselves. And I think we're going to get into like the beauty of group coaching as well, because when we're in containers with other people who are doing the work, as you just said, others can reflect our radiance so much better than we can see it in ourselves. But
Mhm.
before we sort of dive into that, I'd love to kind of ask if there's someone listening that's at this crossroads that's, really looking at themselves only on the external side, but hasn't necessarily started the deep inner work of transformation. What would you suggest or offer, or is there any wisdom that you can share in that space? Like if it's a new client to you and they have no idea that you do all of the other magical things that you do and offer, what would be that invitation to kind of, it's not just what's in the mirror. Let's go deeper.
Well, I mean, I don't force anybody into coaching. I think that's the other thing, right? Like I let people come to me and you have to be ready for it. I do think that if somebody is very, very critical of their appearance, most of the time it's a reflection of how they feel on the inside about themselves, you know? And so sometimes it's just the first step is always noticing, right? Is to be like, why do you feel that way? What makes you feel that way? And then, one of the things that I a lot of times ask my clients, especially when they start and they have no idea that the inner voice, it's just a narrative, right? It's not facts, it's not evidence in court, it's not irrefutable evidence. So if you say, some people go as far as saying, I hate myself, or I hate how I look, or I'm not worthy, or any of the things, the first step is just to notice with kindness, right? And then I always sort of try to implore them, like, where do you think these thoughts and that voice comes from, right? Because a lot of times it's not the kind voice we would speak to our daughters, to our friends, to. It's sort of like a mix of that critical auntie and the boyfriend that dumped you in high school and the girl that was like the mean girl in grade school, right? And somehow that has collated a voice in your head that tells you you're to this, you're to that. And again, it's everybody has their own individual wounds, and we all have wounds around enoughness. So first of all, I think some of it is also to notice that some of the wounds that we have are really universal. Pretty much everybody has a wound around not feeling enough because there's times in our lives where people made us feel less than. And so, again, I do some subconscious healing too. And we're giving that part of us a voice, which is really, really powerful. But really, even just on the conscious level, just to notice that this voice is a separate thing from them and to like really sort of go, is it true? Like, where does this voice even coming from? Can be so powerful because so many times people have spent 30, 40, 50 years just kind of accepting and
Yeah.
living by everything that inner dialogue says.
Mhm. Yeah, and changing themselves and having expectations of others. And absolutely. Yeah, I love that. So having that self-awareness is super important, very helpful. And I love that, you said question the voice, rather than just accepting it as true. First of all, yes, where does it come from? Which is more of like an inquiry and getting to know and digging a little bit, but really just question, is what I'm hearing coming from me? Or is that me criticizing myself? And what is the deeper desire? I love getting into that deeper desire of what is really wanted here. How is it trying to serve me? Because I do think that even, when the ego speaks up, it does have a really good intention. It's just most times we don't really go there. We just stay
Right. And
on the
most of the
surface.
time, you're absolutely right. All of those habits, and I think that's also a really interesting point to notice, is they have served us, right? They have kept us out of trouble. They have kept us safe or perceived safe. They have, kept us from being kicked out of the group. I mean, again, in an evolutionary sense, right? And they have gotten us through education, medical school promotions, all of
That's
that
right.
stuff. So that voice has served us. And, there's always an and.
Yes, yes, and yes, I love that.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So Judith, I'm really excited to dive into the conversation that we were talking about around group coaching because it's something
Mhm.
that I think for me, as I was even, even in medicine when I was kind of going through my training, I always wondered, why don't we do this in groups of people? Why are we repeating the same conversations over and over again with different
Mhm.
patients? And, like, why don't we have a diabetes support group? Why don't we have this kind of group? Why don't we have that kind of group for that sort of group evolution and education? And I love that, going into coaching, there was a desire to do one-on-one, but a big part of me just wanted to go straight into group coaching because of the dynamics and what happens in the room when like one person shares their story and it really lands in the hearts of really everyone in the room, and that transformation that happens. So I would love to hear from you. What's been your experience as somebody who's been in coaching programs, in one-on-ones, but then also in a group dynamic? And then also, what do you offer to your clients as sort of that one-on-one or group? And what's the difference?
Yeah, so I mean, again, I think there's a caveat I want to put at the beginning is that there's well-run groups and not well-run groups, right? And whenever you do run groups, safety has to be the utmost for all concerned in a group. So I definitely know there's a lot of people out there, or I've had some clients who had like one bad group experience, which is very unfortunate, right? Or they're thinking of a group as still the mean kids from high school, or like, you know what I mean? It makes them feel too vulnerable. But I think you and I, we both create groups with just the utmost care and safety and holding that space. And I think group coaching, especially if you have experienced it, and sometimes it's hard to describe when people haven't experienced it, right? But I think there is like this power of a collective transformation that, first of all, I do definitely believe that like the power of us all is greater than the power of one. But I think on a more like how people granularly can understand it, a lot of us feel, or in my coaching, I've seen that sort of people feel like they're broken, or this is their issue, or sometimes things like depression, PTSD, abuse isolates us. So, on a most basic level, there is just something about knowing like you're not broken and you're not the only one. And this is not you. It's being a mother in your 40s and all of the expectations placed on society. It is being a doctor in the healthcare system that like prioritizes metrics versus your well-being. It is, like a wife to somebody who has PTSD from military experience, whatever that situation is. I think there's something already so therapeutic in knowing that you're not alone and in knowing that it's not you and you're not broken and you're not flawed. But then in another way, it is kind of interesting because sometimes when somebody else gets coached on a topic that might be something you're struggling with, as the observer, you get very different insights as the person that's being coached. And I don't know if you have found that. It is a really, really interesting thing is that when we're kind of put on the spot, yes, we go deep, we process our issues, but then being the objective observer that is maybe not as emotionally attached and in a different state of really, maybe fight or flight or relaxation, or I'm trying to sort of like, I'm trying to find the right word, but like in a neurological state of more calm,
Mm-hmm.
the amount and degree of learning and lessons you can pull from that is kind of really incredible. And then most of us really crave to be seen. They crave to be heard. They crave to be appreciated. So in a group of community or a supportive group, like all of those things can also happen, and you can really go through that transformation together versus alone
Mm-hmm.
and be witnessed.
Yeah, I love what you said about being the observer, because for me, in my experience of group coaching, it was part of my training that I did to become a mastery method coach. So I took two very different programs, and one of them was kind of that self-paced health coaching, life coaching certification. And then we had monthly calls where you could ask questions. But in the other container where it was a group call for learning. There was the material separately, but then we saw people getting coached. And for somebody who, I call myself an emotional ninja, I've been an emotional ninja my whole life. And I think a lot of us in healthcare are, because there's not time for us to process our emotions when we're holding space for our patients and giving news and having to move on. And it's like, we just don't have that safety and that time and that space to really process. And so in that emotional ninja space coming into coaching, I really had to open up a lot of layers, like remove a lot of veils of lack of permission to feel, like that lack of safety or that judgment that came in that you need to go to anger management, like when you're a teenager and everything's wrong and you're just mad at the world, right? And you react and it's like, wait a second, my anger is not safe. And, my sadness isn't safe and this isn't safe. And so it's really beautiful. I think for me, what happened in that container was I was able to see people safely processing emotions and how beautifully that was received and the compassion that they had for themselves. It was honestly, it was a no-go space for me before. I didn't even know that emotions could be processed so beautifully. And then you can hear about the science behind, oh, it only takes 90 seconds to process an emotion. But when you see somebody going through that and then their life completely transforms after, you're like, wow, I want that too. You mean that's possible for me? And it's almost like this permission slip to be as authentic as you can possibly be, right? As open as you have within you that is calling you forward. It is a calling forward. Whereas when you're on your own, it's almost like those judgments, even though somebody tells you, I'm holding a space, this is, safe for you. And there are certain levels, I think, of seeing it being done to allow ourselves the freedom to actually be held in that space as well. So that's why I really loved my experience of that group coaching, is it invited me in and showed me how it can be done. Right. And so
And
my nervous system relaxed into that a lot.
yeah, that's the word I was looking for, the relaxed nervous system. And I think you bring up something really great in a great group. It's really the idea of stuff being safe, like,
Mhm.
right? And also seeing what's possible. Like, I love this idea of showing people what's possible, because you're absolutely right. Unless you see it done, and this is why, representation matters so much when we
Mm.
talk about all the DI inclusivity things. Like, representation is so important, because until you know it's possible, until you really truly feel and believe that it's possible, it's not going to happen.
That's right.
And I love that you bring that up about group coaching, because it's that same thing. When you can experience a level of healing and vulnerability, and also like a level of rising and a level of success,
Yeah.
you start to sort of just take on that
Yeah.
it's possible.
Yeah. And that group momentum that you mentioned too, like when one rises, we all rise. We actually elevate at other people's frequency, whether they're choosing to do the work or not. They can choose to be completely ignorant of their emotions, of everything, and not do a single thing towards shifting and transforming and still be elevated in that space because they're in it, because they're watching it. That was my whole first year. And even though I was very resistant to actually doing work, I'm always holding space for others, but very resistant. And so I actually went in a second year so that I can be held, so that I can do the transformation. But even in that first year, as you said, there's so many insights that I gained. There's so much permissiveness that I was able to actually play in the world in a different way, in a much more observant way, in a much more permissive way. Like life was happening for me already, even though I hadn't gone deep to do those deep transformation processes, those kind of getting into the weeds of like core wound healing and childhood issues and all those different things. It still elevated my capacity to be with myself and be authentic as I could be where I was in the moment, right?
And I think that's another really good point, that sometimes, we're not willing to go somewhere.
Yeah.
But again, seeing that somebody else is,
Yeah.
it directly benefits us, or it gives us permission to share that degree of vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing I think too, when we're transforming and we're literally allowing old parts of us to die. And as you said, it's so important to honor those old parts of us that got us this far, because there is no part that's actually meant to be shamed or blamed. Or, I posted today about shame because it's so important to actually recognize how shame holds us back from our evolution. And it's really that honoring of where we were at the time and moving through that. But then as you sort of get into a new way of being, those old habits, those lower energies sort of creep up once in a while. And so it's such a beautiful way to it's almost like training wheels, right? You get to put your training wheels on and you get to do it messy in a group that's super safe. And, you have people that will support you, that'll give you that feedback, that'll remind you of your greatness, that'll reflect that radiance. And it's just so much, to me, was so much easier to walk with that confidence, knowing that even if I do say something quote unquote wrong, or, out of the ordinary, or it's a little different, I can actually be confident in who I am in that space. And because I have that support system, I know that going out into the world, even if it feels odd because it's new, I know that it is who I am, right? And I think that's the other beauty of, especially with my groups, of authenticity. Authenticity is something that, you're stepping into the unknown, right? If you've sort of held back from sharing your truth, if you've held back from making decisions that are completely true to who you really are, rather than who society expects you to be, or who your parents or your partner or your children, or, all of the different things. And we talk about the 7-year cycles in spirituality and growth and all of those moments. But it's like when you get to that 7-year cycle and you're reborn into a new way of being, right? It's so important to have that spirit tribe. And I think in these places you meet these people, right? Like, I'm so grateful you and I met, and it was through sort of one of those coaching containers, but you really meet people that stay with you for life, because those are
Right.
energies that are attracted. Like, we are literally attracted in the same space to be with people who we're connected. So
And
yeah.
also people that have sort of seen you at your worst, right? Not
Mm,
necessarily mean your worst. It's more like what you would say, like you're most broken down. Because
yes.
sometimes we do need to break down in order to heal. And, there is such a like degree, I think, in of love and compassionate admiration when
Mm,
you've seen somebody vulnerable and you've seen somebody grow,
mm,
that I have a group of friends from a coaching container I was in for over a year, and when we see each other, it's just awesome. It doesn't mean it's all touchy-feely or, we coach each other. It's just more that idea that there's this true shared closeness
yeah.
because we've seen our authentic selves. And it's not about whether you have the latest Louis Vuitton bag, or if your face is perfectly done, or if you've reached your goal weight. That sometimes if you think you're showing up to like a country club party or benefit party or whatever, like sometimes you get judged on. No, because we have seen each other's like souls,
Yes.
and there's a different level of connection that arises from that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's absolutely true. And we are, like, every single person that's standing across from you, they are a soul embodied as a human. And we all have a vulnerable side, and we all have these things that we go through, right? And so, yeah, I love that reflection of, when you have gone through something like that. And the word vulnerability is something that, like, it's a really big lesson in this transformational space. If you're not willing to be vulnerable, there's only so far you can go. And that level of, as you said, respect, yes, but it's that level of transparency. It's like,
Mhm.
that person is exactly who they say they are, and you've seen through all of those layers, and you've been part of that journey. That is something so priceless. Yeah, it's just beautiful. Yeah. Mm, I love you. I just want to
Yeah,
hug you right
same.
now. Yeah. So I'm curious about what's to come, and I know what's to come, but I want to share it with the audience that's here
The world,
listening.
yeah. So, the seeing that we've talked about groups, I think this is the perfect segue that, I'm hosting an amazing transformative retreat in April. Ralitza is going to be there facilitating sort of the awakening into the divine feminine as only she can. And really the idea is this transformation, this sisterhood, like think about just again being exquisitely held, you know, sort of, are you ready to really like unlock all of your peace, all of your prosperity? Are you ready to like live and love and lead from your most empowered self? At the beautiful Miraval, Tucson, and especially if you're in a place like Ralitza is in Canada and you want to get out of the cold in April, that is like the perfect thing to go in the desert. And it's my favorite time in the desert because the desert blooms. And the Miraval is luxurious. It's a sacred space. It's just like thinking about it already gives me chills because it's just going to be an incredibly transformative, fun event. We are doing about 4 hours of workshops a day so that you have plenty of time to rest, relax, connect, take care of yourself. So really, the idea is really this transformation into who is that next version of you? And is she ready to come play? And, let's meet her, let's empower her, you know, let's step into that next version together.
Yeah. Yeah. And so powerful, such a beautiful, powerful space that it's going to be because you're right. It's that, coming out of your cocoon into a place that's quiet and safe and sacred, and you have that time with yourself, doing personal transformation in your home with your family, with your work, with everything around. It can be challenging because it really does take those moments to actually stretch your wings and have that time and have that space and have that spirit tribe around that's going through the same transformational process. And it's just so beautiful to take flight together after that. So yeah,
Yeah.
very, very
And I'm a
exciting.
huge fan of retreats. I mean, whenever I've been in a retreat, again, just because you kind of step out of your old patterns and you get let go of some of those, not only the cognitive load that we most carry, right? Because a lot of us have so much cognitive load all the time from our responsibilities. But then also you get to like look at things anew because you're in a new space. You get to experience things anew. You get to meet yourself anew. And, whenever I've done a retreat, it's like, 5 months of work and it doesn't even feel like work, but 5 months of transformation in
Yeah.
like 3 or 4 days, simply because you create the energy and the space and you're able to focus your
Mhm.
entire like divine self on it, and there's nothing pulling your energy other ways than where it wants to go. I don't want to use the word focus because it seems so serious, but I think it's just that idea of just being in a space of creativity and a space of like self-love and a space of all of that that is sometimes I think hard to match in
Mhm.
your daily life when you worry about the commute and dinner and
Totally.
paying bills and what's next and oh, did I forget to send the like permission slip for the like field trip? It's when you have that cognitive load, it's
Yeah.
so hard
Yeah.
sometimes to really then like you can't get that same level of dreaming and
Mhm.
creating
Mhm.
as when you're out of that space.
Yeah. Wow. That's so beautiful. And devotion is the word that comes to mind because really, I mean, if you think about back in the day, I say back in the day with kind of earmarks, but it's interesting because we don't actually, most people don't hold that sacred space for themselves. And especially women, we're meant to do things cyclically. We're meant to hold space for ritual and to really dive into ourselves and to be in that feminine flow. And I mean, our world just really, the way that we've committed our time and our energy does not allow for it. You're right. And so being able to tap out and really go away so that you're physically not there, so that people can't constantly be, even if you do put your phone on, do not disturb and take a week off of work. And like you said, there's always that because of the energy and the space is not the same. It's the same as you've always been in. When you go on a retreat, everything changes. And then you
Mhm.
bring that energy back into your space and then transform your space at home too, and your relationships and everything. So,
Exactly. You
so
get to
beautiful.
bring that thing back. You
Yeah.
get to bring that back, and the tools that you've learned stay with you.
Yeah.
It's not just a vacation where you come back. Like it's that transformation. You said it's so beautiful. You get to bring it back to your space. And just by you being different, your space will transform, your relationship will transform. It really only takes one energy being different to transform the whole thing.
Totally, totally. I'm so excited. This is going to be such a beautiful space. And I'm so honored that it came through so clearly and the like watching you and observing you and everyone that's going to be there. It's so beautiful. But you're also offering coaching before the retreat. Is that right? So when people sign up for the retreat, they
Yeah.
also get held in a coaching
Yes,
container.
yes. I love that you brought that up because absolutely, the transformation really starts before the retreat. So for the month before the retreat, we are offering a month of group coaching, and that idea is really to, I mean, there's a lot of ideas behind that, but some of it is that, number one, for anybody who might be coming alone or might be hesitant, like you're not meeting up with a bunch of strangers. Like there's people that you will already know that you've already gotten to know, identified with. So then the coming together is a celebration. And then again, to just really magnify that transformation, it's this idea of already setting the intention, starting we call it the work, but it's really, when I think about some of these terms that we use in coaching, they're quite heavy, but
Yeah.
really like, like the work. It's gonna work. No, it's like the funnest work you'll ever do, but already starting probably maybe even just the process of like listening and inquiry and looking at certain things with more self-compassion and curiosity and, starting some of those tools and giving them a month to bloom, like we're planting the seeds already, right? So, if we're like the gardener, we're already, tilling the soil and planting the seeds. And yeah, so that's a complete bonus because it's not just 3 days, it's a month leading up to it. So those 3 days are going to be transformation pure and also like a celebration and like uniting of everybody that you've met online, because how many of us like have online friends now? It's like a thing and it's really cool, but nothing really beats the in-person connection and the in-person energy. And I think it's going to be very, not only magnify the transformation, but also make those that are maybe a little bit hesitant about going on a retreat or I'm going by myself, not feel like this is a strange place that they're going to show up with people they don't know.
Totally, totally. I love that.
Find
And
your
just like you
retreat
shared,
bestie before.
sorry, say that again.
You can find your retreat bestie before.
Exactly. Well, that's that level of vulnerability that we were talking about before, right? When you do see yourself in someone else's triggers or traumas or transformation that they're going through, you meet yourself. And so to be excited to see those people in person is transformational in and of itself. In that, you when it's so interesting because like when you go through that transformation with somebody and then you see them in person, it's almost like you're hugging yourself because you do share those things, right? And so it's just such a beautiful process. And you're right, from the masterminds that I've held for people, it's every single time there's such deep friendships. And they even plan to go and visit each other because they want to see each other in person. Like it is that deep that we get to go. So I absolutely love that you're combining both and that the retreat is that space to really, come into transformation and leave a transformed human being altogether and just be able to stay in touch and celebrate each other. And, there will be moments where, oh, wait a second, we forgot who we are for a moment, but those people are always going to be there for you to message or call, or even, the way that we really connect. I mean, in those transformational spaces, we feel each other. We know when the other person needs a little check-in, and that's the bond that's formed in these spaces. And so I just think they're priceless. It's like those deep friendships you wanted when you were a kid, but we were all just kids, so no one ever really formed them.
Well, and I mean, let's be real. Like when we think about when women, especially women in middle, like in the middle of their life, I don't want to say middle age, but
Yeah,
when professional women get asked like what they miss, like friendship is
yeah,
a huge one
totally.
because, we do spend so much of our lives not only tending to our jobs and careers, but, then our kids and our relationships and all of that stuff. And especially when I'm surrounded by a lot of women in medicine, and they're like, well, during med school, we had these friends because we're going through that together, and maybe during residency, and now I'm out in practice, and I feel like nobody can really relate to me, and I don't, when I see the neighborhood moms, I might not have that much in common, and when I see these moms, I might not have that much in common, and unfortunately, I think loneliness and feeling a lack of deep friendship is very common, and it's more common in people that are very high achieving because
Hmm.
it sort of does isolate you.
It
So
does.
it is amazing to find your tribe, and not only find your tribe that you share the retreat with, but that you share values with, that you can check in with, that you can be vulnerable with. And I have some great friends that I met in other, like I said, coaching containers, retreats, and you're absolutely right. Like there's just we get each other, and when we talk, the conversations are different. I mean, again, they're not heavy, they're not boring. It just, it goes beyond the like, I'm good, you're good. This
Yeah.
is the kind of school my kid got into, like, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, they're deep right away. You just go back to that deep, deep connection, and it's so beautiful. Well, thank you. I'm so, so excited. So excited for Miraval. So excited for all of the amazing souls that will be there to be transformed in the space and to really hold each other and hold ourselves in the space. Because I find that every single one of these spaces, it is also for us that are leading the space, that are supporting the space. We also transform with everyone that's in it. So it's just such a beautiful, harmonious experience that, yeah, I'm really looking forward to being there, to holding space for that deep dive into the feminine. Oh my goodness, Isis is knocking on my door strong, and yes, so many things have come through that we need to connect and talk about as well. But yeah, very excited. Where can people sign up, Judith?
Yeah, so my brand is called The Aesthetic Doctor. So if you go onto my website, The Aesthetic Doctor, there's a little tile for the retreat. I'm sure you're going to link it in all your show notes. I'm also very active on Instagram. My Instagram is at Dr. Borger. That's spelled out. So it's DoctorBorger. There's a link there. People can always message me, get a hold of me. Like if you have any questions, if you wonder if this is for you, if you have X, Y, and Z concerns, like I'm always here. And I just can't wait to meet all the beautiful souls that are gonna feel called to join us and to give you an in-person hug. And I always say, like, I would love to give everybody a hug, except for if you're not a hugger, I respect that, right? Like, but
Absolutely.
yeah, I can't wait to, meet everybody, and a lot of, not a lot of, but some of the people I already know because they've reached out and things like that. And so I can't wait to like, meet up in person.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I'm so excited for that too, and for everyone that's going to be there. And if you are curious, it will be linked in the show notes. And we don't have bots in our chats, so please DM us because we like to connect with our
Yes.
audience.
Yes. No bots.
So must, right? Beautiful. So before we wrap up here, I'm just curious if there's something else, a last comment, a quote, something you want to share with the audience, a remembrance, whatever you'd like to leave them with, a pearl in life that,
Ooh.
yeah.
I think, because of the journey that I'm going through, I think what I just want to share with everybody is that you are enough.
Mm,
Just as you are, just as you're showing up today, you are completely and utterly enough
mm,
just for being you. And that has always been enough. That will always be enough. So I think if there's one thing that I would love to leave everybody with, is just to do a little bit of hand to heart and really like remember, and maybe just from like say it as a mantra a couple of times, like I am enough. because that is really like so, so, so true.
Mm, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's such a gift. And it sounds so simple, right? We don't take the time to do it. So, your invitation today for anybody listening, take those 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, take that minute and remind yourself that you are enough. Thank you so much, Judith. Thank you for being with us on the podcast. Thank you for your friendship, your love, your passion, and your dedication to creating this container and this beautiful conversation. I really can't wait to hug you.
I know, can't wait either. And thank you so much for having me.
Take care, love.